Welcome, everyone. I'm staying so close to Courtney. We are friends, but in fact, she's got the mic and I don't, and so I'm trying to make sure I'm heard for the tape. This is the Faith Matters lecture series. Today, as I'm sure you know, it's Courtney Mayer speaking on that topic right there. Very glad you could be with us. This is also connected to the, what's the official name? The environmental...
Live United campaign. This topic actually ties in beautifully with the Live United campaign that is focusing on a year-long conversations about unity in faith, science, and practice. And lucky me, that's exactly what my topic actually addresses. So
and it ties in nicely with Creation Care Week. So
and Creation Care Week,
hit the trifecta, right?
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Courtney.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. I'm really excited to share my story about my topic here, reimagining Pope Francis's Laudato Si on care of our common home. First of all, how many people have heard of this book, Laudato Si on care of our common home? A few people? Okay. All right. So how did I get involved with this? I'm going to start out by just giving you a little bit about my background, explain a little bit about what an encyclical is, what it's about, what my process is, and so I'm going to go ahead and take it away. So as a faculty member, a new faculty member, I'm now in my starting my 6th year. I've been trying to figure out all along, how do I integrate my graphic design discipline and my Christian faith? What are my interests? What am I called to do? So I look back at some of my key life influences, and one thing that was significant really was my Catholic faith tradition. In my hometown of Spokane, the parish priests were from the Jesuit order, and they taught us about God's infinite love, mercy, and forgiveness, sharing our gifts, social justice, concern for the poor and the marginalized, loving God with your whole heart, your whole mind, your whole strength, and loving your neighbor as yourself. You're all familiar with those values, right? Yeah. I also had a grandfather whose father built a cabin in Lake Coeur d'Alene in 1945. And he would take me and my brother and my sisters and I on these hikes. And this was my favorite hike because my grandfather would share stories about the indigenous Coeur d'Alene Indians. He would talk about their lifestyle. He would talk about plants. He would talk about animals. The other significant influence in my life as a second grader, 7 years old, in Spokane, we were hosting for the first time, a World's Fair. And it was the first environmentally themed World's Fair that had ever taken place. It included Australia, Canada, West Germany, Iran, Japan, Taiwan, Republic of Korea, the United States, and the USSR. This is what it looked like in 1974. And I think actually the graphics influenced me and they're kind of in my DNA, because I look at my work now and I see similarities. It was the debut of the IMAX movie theater for the very first time. And on that IMAX theater, they played this movie called Man Belongs to the Earth by Paramount Pictures, and it was a 23-minute movie narrated by Chief Seattle. And it focused on environmental splendor, and it also focused on humans' role in the degradation of that beautiful natural splendor. So back here at PLNU, these are the forces that came together that led me to working and thinking about this project. How could I integrate my faith into practice? How could I integrate my interest for care of humanity and the planet based on my childhood upbringing? Well, I started to apply for research grants that would help me as a graphic designer do deeper research, and I came across this human-centered design way of doing research that was very inquiry-based. It was a structured approach with broad and wide scope and depth, and I wanted to use it to help inform my design decisions. So also what happened at that time was in the fall of 2015, I was approached by the Office of Sustainability, and Tricia Stoll was the director at the time. And she said, Courtney, can you partner with one of your classes and help me promote Creation Care Week? And I thought, wow, that's kind of cool. Maybe we could pair human-centered design research methods. I could teach them that, and then we could use creation care as a means for visual communication on campus. So it's my first time to lead a project using human-centered design research methods. I asked the students to make their design engaging and interactive, that it would be seen and approached by people on campus for a week. I wanted them to illuminate the sustainability story. What is PLNU doing in terms of sustainable practices? And how does that relate to creation care? I also asked them to create a call to action. I asked them to reflect on what their faith tradition believed about care for God's creation, climate change, and sustainability, and see if they could weave some of those messages into the communication as well. And then I thought, well, if I'm asking them to do that, maybe I should do that myself. What does my Catholic faith tradition believe about creation care? And that is when I discovered Pope Francis's Laudato Si on Care of Our Common Home. The book was published in June of 2015. I found it in August of 2015. And let's see here. Okay. Encyclical comes from Greek, and it means literally a circulating letter. For the modern Roman Catholic Church, a papal encyclical is a specific category of papal document, a kind of letter concerning Catholic doctrine sent by the Pope and usually addressed especially to leadership within the Church so that it can be circulated out to their communities and parishes. This is what it looked like when I first saw it on my iPad. I scrolled, and I scrolled, and I scrolled, and I scrolled, and I was like, wait. And I was reading it, and I was like, wow, this message is amazing, but who is going to read it in this state? It's just too dense. These are the books that have been published by different publishers. It's actually been published 8 or 9 times by different publishers. They all look like this. Okay. So, like I said, I was astonished. The Pope's message was a message that was addressed to all. He wasn't just talking to Catholics. He was talking to all of God's creation. He didn't care if you were atheist. He communicates to all of us as part of God's creation. It was beautifully written. Who will want to read this? How would I design it? And then on the inside of the book jacket, I remember it said, I urgently appeal then for a new dialogue about how we are shaping the future of our planet. All of us can cooperate as instruments of God for the care of creation, each according to his or her own culture, experience, involvements, and talents. And I felt like, oh man, wait, he's not talking to me, is he? And I was like, maybe this is what I'm supposed to do. He was asking us to continue the dialogue. It was a really powerful moment for me because after I read that, I was kind of like I wanted to hide, and I realized, no, I am a graphic designer. I'm a visual communicator. I love designing books. This is scary, but I think I'm going to try. So I felt compelled to try to create a more visually compelling version that would appeal to all. So, you see these books, they're institutional, they feel like they're just for Catholics. And I was like, no, I want my version to feel like these books that belong on tables at Barnes & Noble. How could I make that appealing and compelling for anyone to pick up and want to read? So, how might I redesign Laudato Si, using human-centered research methods, the principles of design, which I teach, and information design, how do people read and see and interpret information. So anyway, I began with the human-centered design, and it's an organizational structure that has 3 phases: inspiration, ideation, and implementation. And it uses 3 lenses to measure your success. You want your end solution to be desirable to the audience of whom you are trying to reach. You want it to be feasible. You want it to be practical. You want it to be something that is doable technologically, in a time frame that works. You want it to be viable. You want it to be within a certain budget. So I began with the inspiration phase, where you frame, and I'm just going to quickly list through these steps, and then I'm going to show you, like, what does that look like for this project. You start by framing the design challenge. You create a project plan. You do secondary research. You interview people. You define who your audience is. And then there's this extremes and mainstreams. What I mean by that is, when you start interviewing people, you realize that there are people that are on this end of the spectrum, and there are people that are on this end of the spectrum. And if I am being true to Pope Francis's way of communicating, Pope Francis says, I'm talking to all of you. I'm not talking to just you guys, okay? So how do I design in a way that's going to reach everyone? There's immersion. There's analogous inspiration. Immersion is like going and getting into a place, for example, that has beautiful designed books. Immersing yourself, learning about beautiful books, learning what makes them special. Analogous inspiration. These examples here, these examples here are like what I want to do. So I started out with framing the design challenge with questions. How might I treat the book as an appealing, tactile, irresistible object where size mattered? And I was thinking about that, how important the size of a book is. I wanted something that I could put in my purse, something I could put on a nightstand, something I could put wherever you read. How might I use sustainable materials? How might I create a layout design that would be reader-friendly? How might I enrich the encyclical with visual images from some of the world's best photographers and artists, and narratives that augment the Pope's message? How might I use technology to connect people to additional global voices and scientific evidence? How might I consider social media, Instagram perhaps, where people around the world could post images and stories related to climate change in their own community? So these were questions that I started out with, just getting inspired and thinking. So the next steps were to create a project plan, and that happened through the opportunity of applying for grants, like the Wesleyan grant and the RASP grants. You've got to describe, what is my project? What am I doing? When am I doing it? These grants allowed me to travel and immerse myself in these analogous examples of beautiful book design. I wanted to find out what were the qualities that make a well-designed book a memorable experience. So I said, okay, what do I want to do? And I thought, okay, I'm going to the Vatican Library. That's the first place to start. And that was an amazing experience. I got to hold the Gutenberg Bible from the 1450s. It came out in a wooden box with leather straps and a lock. And it was very humbling to sit in front of that book. I wanted to look at historical book design and understand the qualities and materials that make them good. I wanted to look at contemporary book design. And so I knew about a designer named Irma Boom, who is someone who's been designing books for about 30 years. And she has designed probably over 300 books. And I thought, well, that's where I go. I go to the best historically, and I go to the best of contemporary. So what I was looking at specifically was book design, materials, print technology, layout, typography, grids, handcrafted illumination from the 1450s and through the early 1500s at the Vatican. This is what it looks like to go into the walls of Vatican City. And this is the doors to the Vatican Library. Unfortunately, no photography in the Vatican Library. So you could bring your laptop, and I just wrote about the experience and the books that I was interested in. Previously, it was about 9 months before I even went, I contacted the director of the Vatican Publishing House and pitched my idea to him. And I said, hey, I'm coming in the summer. Would you be interested in speaking with me about this? And we met that first Monday. And this is the front doors of the Vatican Publishing House. To my surprise and delight, the idea was well received as a means to continue the dialogue. He said, oh, so you mean it's like a commentary of Pope Francis's message using global voices and images? And I said, yes. Next, I went to the Bijou der Collecties, and it's a special collections library at the University of Amsterdam, and looked at the works of Irma Boom. These are some of her books that are truly architectural objects and experiences. She looks at every detail. She invents new ways of book production. This was a book for Coco Chanel for the 100th anniversary. This book is about $10,000. If you wanted to buy it, it comes in this black box. And this is what it looks like when you open the box. The thing I love about Irma Boom is that she always starts conceptually. She said, what is perfume? Perfume, you smell it, but you can't see it. And she said, I want this book to be like that. You can touch it, it's sensory, but there's no ink in this book. It's all blind emboss. And they basically took all text, all photography, all illustration, converted it to these little bitmap dots. And so the entire book is white, no ink anywhere. And that book is a collection piece. Irma Boom's work pushes the boundaries of the book as an architectural object where layout, design, materials, and construction all complement each other and support strong conceptual approaches. Her books are experiences. This one book that I have here that she designed, this book, you have to tear open the pages. And I'm not going to keep doing that. Later. Yes. You can come up and look at those books later. The yellow one glows in the dark. That's another one of hers. So my own personal collection of books inspire me. And I brought some of those to see up close. This Bible is my great-grandmother's. It's 1905 Bible. And I asked my mom if I could bring it back to San Diego with me, and I like it because I love that, there's over 1,000 pages, and it just opens so nicely, and so I've been like, okay, how do you get that to happen? It's through the binding, it's through the paper choices, it's through all kinds of things, and so I like to have all of these things surrounding me to influence what I do. And I'm even considering maybe printing this book on Bible paper. However, it is very expensive, and there's only a few places in the world that do it, and they're, I believe, both located in China. I talked to a printer this summer, And he said, well, how many copies are you making? And I said, well, I think in the millions. It's going to be millions. And he's like, oh, good luck with that. No. That's my hope someday. These are more of some of the books. This is another Irma Boom trick where you can see here, she puts the table of contents on the spine of the book. Who does that? Irma Boom does that because she is always thinking. This is an illuminated Bible that came out just a year ago, I think. Over 500 hand-drawn illuminations for this new Bible. It's the green one sitting there if you want to come up and look at it later. So when I came back from Europe, I wanted to start interviewing people, learning about my audience more. I have a friend named Emily Reimer-Berry who teaches theology at the University of San Diego, and she taught the class in the springtime before I spoke with her. And I said, hey, Emily, tell me what it was like to teach with this book. And she talked about the positive sides of it, of how Pope Francis's message really shows this integral connection between morals, ethics, behaviors, your faith, as it relates to the care of God's creation for people and the planet. She said, the students felt that it was dense and long, and it was tough to get through the information. So she said also that the students felt that the Pope really made it real for them, that they began thinking about it in their daily lives for the first time. So his messaging works. I began also doing informal interviews with my own parish community, talked to parishioners, priests, nuns, Benedictine monks. I spoke with people of all ages and disciplines from other faith traditions and those who were even atheists. I wanted to understand my audience, like I said before, the extremes and mainstreams. How could I reach them? I was also questioned sometimes, like, well, why don't you just do an online book? And I thought, well, yeah, but there are different ways that we read and absorb information. If we're looking at information and it's online, we're typically in kind of a scan mode. You're going quickly, you're skimming, you're searching. But when you get a book, it slows you down because it's a tactile experience. You absorb more. There's greater retention. You remember more because you're using more of your senses. You read more carefully. I love this quote at the very end of this article. It says, her favorite response from students was, in terms of reading a book, it takes me longer because I read more carefully. That's awesome. Okay, the other thing that I thought was interesting was looking at, I wanted to do research on religion and science and how they work together. And so I started collecting anything and everything that I could find on the topic. And so I'm just going to quickly kind of scan through these newspaper articles that I collected. Dr. Ramanathan of UCSD, a climate scientist, and Reverend John Cobb, I guess it was in the springtime, talked about how they felt that if science and faith, science and religion could work together to better communicate what's happening, that they could make a big difference. Has anyone heard of Catherine Cahoe? She's an evangelical scientist, but I listened to her speak on the radio one day, and I frantically grabbed an envelope off the table and started scrawling my notes. But she talked about moral forces. She talked about how governments, civil society, and business should be working together on this topic. She talked about Laudato Si and how it encourages integral ecology. Let's see, go back here. She talked about how can the world's religions contribute more effectively to this renewed momentum for change. Consumption has become an almost quasi-religion. We distance ourselves from nature through the more we consume. These are just things that I quickly wrote down. Begin to see the interconnectedness of things, and we rationalize it. How can we change our perspectives as looking at the world as a commodity that we can exploit? So what is happening to our common home? This was a recent Steve Breen comic. Catholics are going green. Other interfaith groups are talking about the greening of religion and how can we work together. So again, I'm just going to, for time's sake, I'm going to quickly go through these things. But, you know, I remember when reading the newspaper that you used to be able to read it and never hear about climate change. And now it seems like it's every day, and it's not just every day, it's multiple articles every day. This is an Earth Watch, and I want to point out there in the top left corner, it's the first time there's an icon for climate sick. I had never noticed that before. This was a woman who lost all of her children in the Reading fire. These things have a real impact on people. This was in July temperatures, Death Valley 120, Death Valley 122 in August. This was the worst Greek fire in a decade. This article was very sad. 26 vacationers ended up dying in that fire. Sea level rise, extreme storms, animals and extinction, pollution. All of these things are things that I can't ignore anymore. So, time for a rhetorical trope. Chiasmus, I believe is how it's pronounced, a rhetorical or literary figure in which words, grammatical constructions, or concepts are repeated in reverse order in the same or modified form. I heard this on the radio one day, and then I said, oh, I'm going to try that with climate change. You have seen how humans damaged the earth. You shall see how humans save the earth. You have seen how humans threaten creation. You shall see how humans save creation. Humans have threatened creation. Humans can save creation. We threaten creation. Now we can save it. That made me feel better to hear that on the radio. And so I also think, as a graphic designer, it's my responsibility to look to other disciplines to help inform what I do as a designer. And I've found interesting things in sociology, psychology, theology, science that are helping to inform my decisions. So it's been a couple of years that I've been working on this. One of the new things is there are a couple universities in the country. George Mason University now has a Center for Climate Change Communication, and Yale has a program on climate change communication. So I'm starting to go to those places to find out, well, what are the ways that people engage in this topic, and what are the ways that people disengage with this topic, and how can you avoid people disengaging in the topic? And so anyway, these are some of the research points that they talk about to engage people in the topic. Start with people, connect to common values, acknowledge ambivalence, make it real, emphasize solutions, inspire and empower, focus on personal benefit, end with your ask, sequence matters, describe, don't label, have at least one powerful fact with a trusted messenger, ditch the doom and gloom, use stories to strengthen engagement, stay above the fray, and message discipline is critical. So anyway, the second part of human-centered design is the ideation phase, where you download your learnings, you find themes and insights, you brainstorm, you get visual, you use design principles, you think conceptually, you make rapid prototypes, you get feedback, and you iterate. And so this is where I start with a lot of note-taking, and my ideas are everywhere. And this was my very first copy of Laudato Si that I kind of have made my own. Let me just break down the chapters briefly. Chapter 1, what is happening to our common home, focuses on the science. Chapter 2, the gospel of creation, talks about faith, interfaith. Chapter 3, the human roots of the ecological crisis and focusing on technology. Chapter 4, the integral ecology. He talks a lot about social justice themes. Chapter 5, lines of approach and action. What can we do with policy? Chapter 6, ecological education and spirituality, future thinking. Some of the things that I've thought about in terms of the making of the book are looking at materials like recycled paper, what kind of paper stock am I going to use? I came across this new technology, and I believe it comes from Korea, but it's called air ink. And it literally comes from the exhaust pipes of automobiles. These are the tests, and artists are using it as black ink. And I actually emailed them and I said, are you going to be making this for offset printing? And they said, yeah, we're working on it right now. So if the timing is right, that would be super cool if I could use some air ink. These are some of the physical prototypes that I started making early on. And I went out to my garage literally and got my subscriptions of Dwell magazine and started cutting them up. And I look back now and I go, oh yeah, that's Hallie, my daughter's first, that was the first issue that I grabbed. I didn't know that illustration was on the back of it. And now I look at it and I'm delighted that it's there. But I wanted to get a feel for how do I want to hold it in my hands? How thick will it be if it's a certain number of pages? I started doing layout studies. These are some of the early prototypes. I started highlighting the text so that when I went back, I could choose imagery that I wanted to use as the single focused message. I also thought about incorporating technology in a way that at the end of each chapter, to augment the message, I wanted to send people to additional websites to get additional scientific evidence or information about a certain topic. And so I thought of the idea of incorporating QR codes. Okay. Where I'm at now is in the implementation phase, where I am continuing to prototype with the book. The whole structure of the book is fully there, but there's still gaps that need to be filled in between. I'm developing that roadmap. This summer it's approximately 300 pages of the book that are done now. I sent that as a PDF form to the Vatican Publishing House, and they said, yes, continue. And this week, I actually heard back from them again, asking me, how's it going? Their only requirement is that I find an agent and a publisher, and I said, great, I'll work on that. And then, of course, once you get that, then you've got funding strategies, make a revenue plan, monitor how things are going. I want to keep evaluating all the time and get feedback and until the very end. Oh, wait, I want to go back here one more time. Okay. There's a quote by Seth Marco, who is a co-owner of the book Catapult here in San Diego. I found an article he had written a couple summers ago, and I loved this quote. Books are humanity's physical form of communicating stories, opinions, ideas, histories, mythologies, and folklore. The sharing of these stories and histories informs that culture and binds humanity together. And then this quote as well by Dr. Ramanathan. Until we get our message into every church, every mosque, every temple, every movement, the environment will not change. When we do, it will. So I want to show you briefly what the book looks like right now on a location online called Issue, where you can upload single PDF pages, and it will treat it like a real book online. For the cover, NASA has carbon maps related to temperature, and this is just a screen grab of one of their models that they had available online, and actually the images from NASA are free to use. But I want to figure out a way, and I've been doing some research with thermochromic inks to see if there would be a way, as when you touch it, that the colors would change. Like a mood ring from the 70s. You remember those? Ideally, I would love that to work on paper. And so I've experimented this summer, not to my liking yet, but I'm not giving up. So now more than ever is what I'm calling mine. Pope Francis's Laudato Si on care of our common home. And the thing I realized was that I need to have a reason for this thing to come out again. And I learned that the Catholic Church really wants to do a big celebration at the 5-year anniversary of Laudato Si. And I'm looking at the time right now, and I'm thinking, okay, it takes about a year, maybe a year and a half with the publisher. If I get this thing finished now, I could come out for the 5th year anniversary and be the special 5-year anniversary edition. That is my hope and plan. So say a prayer for that one. Let's see here. Okay, so then you open it. Here's the title page. And again, I am creating a structure. Think of this as a book as like a system of type, image, color, grid. It opens with a foreword by Mary Evelyn Tucker and John Grimm of Yale University. They have a beautiful introduction to why this Pope Francis's message is so perfect for this time, for all of us to be thinking about. I'll just read the first paragraph. Pope Francis is highlighting an integral ecology that brings together concern for humans and the earth. He makes it clear that the environment can no longer be seen as only an issue of scientific experts or environmental groups or government agencies alone. Rather, he invites all people, programs, and institutions to realize these are complicated environmental and social problems that require integrated solutions beyond a technocratic paradigm that values an easy fix. Within this integrated framework, he urges bold new solutions. And then I have these chapter dividers that remind you of what you're about to enter into this new chapter. And then I wanted to create a structure that would be very different than anything that you normally see in books. And the cool thing about what Pope Francis did in this book that looks like it's, never ending was he numbered every paragraph. And so it made it so easy for me to just chunk this information into shorter, more absorbable messaging. And then I thought, this is now more like a reflection book. Something small, and it doesn't mean you have to start from start to finish. You can start in the middle It doesn't matter. And so I try to, when I can, find also stories that go with those pictures to make the message more accessible to people. It's simple. But now a lot of the Catholic universities are using Laudato Si in the classroom. They're encouraging a cross-discipline use of Laudato Si to connect with all disciplines. So if you're an economist, if you are an environmental scientist, if you are a theologian, if you are an artist, they're wanting the faculty to incorporate the Laudato Si message with their disciplines and ask the questions. What does this mean for you and your discipline? Some of the photographers that I'm interested in there's a Canadian photographer named Edward Burtynsky, and he just came out with a new film called The Anthropocene, and I highly recommend going to see it. He uses very high-end photography, drone video, to talk about what's happening. And another good resource for me has been National Geographic, Getty Images. And once I get a publisher, there's going to have to be this whole lengthy process of getting licensing to use these images. This is an example of a section with the QR codes that you could go at the end of this chapter 1, what's happening to our common home, to the NASA's global climate change, vital signs of the planet, and see different models of sea level rise, ice melting, temperature rise over time, temperature related to carbon. So it's just a way to continue, like I said, the dialogue. I'm going to skip ahead much quicker and be done. I'm going to get to near the end. Oh, we had a guest this week, Scott Kennedy, who came to speak. And the irony is that this summer I found this image of these contacts. Pope Francis is talking about technology and as it affects humanity, and this is a positive example of technology use with humanity. These contact lenses are going to help people with diabetes, and also people that can't see far and near. They have the ability for you to see both far and near. Okay. But hopefully some of these images will make it just more real to the message. And then get to the end. Those are not blank pages, by the way. And it ends with some prayers that Pope Francis wrote. And also, I don't know if you guys are aware, but the Pope has a Pontifical Academy of Sciences that help inform him about our planet and the health of our planet and our responsibility to it. And I've included that in the back as the scientific evidence that informed Pope Francis to write what he wrote. So, anyway. That is where I'm at, and now it's bringing it to the finish line. It's in good enough shape to take to an agent and publisher, try to find one, and my hope is that happens by the end of the year, and ideally that it would go into production and be available for June 2020. So, thank you. Thank you. Do you have any questions? Yes?
There's some really powerful images in your book, the photography. Can you talk a little bit about how you find them and select them?
Yeah. So it starts by reading the individual selected message. And it was actually really hard to figure out because a lot of times the messages would have multiple topics within them. But like I showed you, I had highlighted text in earlier versions. And then I just did searches, Google searches for those topics. And the sites that really gave me the best luck were some of the newspaper sites, some of the artists, fine art photographers. National Geographic is very good. So I really was focused on trying to augment the message, to make the message, to have an emotional or visceral reaction with it, to make it more real, make it come to life. Other questions? Yeah.
What's the dimension? I don't know.
The dimension is 4 1/4 by 6 1/4. This is one of the prototypes. This is one that is more recent. If you want to come up and look at it later, but it doesn't have all of the pages in it. But yeah, this is what I want. This is the feeling that I want. This is perfect bound right now, so it doesn't lay flat. And so I'm going to have to use a method that combines groups of pages, sewn pages, so that no matter how many pages, it will lie flat when you open it to the center. So that's, but when you're doing rapid prototypes, this is fine. Yeah. And you guys are all welcome to come up and take a look at these. These are the prototypes. These are original books, and then these are some of my inspirational books. Other questions? Yeah, Chris.
How many different themes did you really go through, right, before you finalized on that very thematic way you see every set of 2 pages?
How many iterations did I go through? A lot. A lot, yeah. I do a lot of layout studies before I ever get to that. And my students know this, those that work with me. I save everything. And I'm not afraid to be wrong 99 times until I get to the 100th try. And, but yeah, it takes many tries to tweak it to the point where you really like it. And I see it now even. It's like, oh, that's a little too small. I have to open up the tracking so you can read that better. I have to make it a little bit bigger. I have to. But I really wanted a layout that I hadn't seen before with that structure, especially on the left-hand page with the type. I wanted the font to be very easy to read, accessible. Yeah.
It just made me, that
Yeah.
reminded me, are you going to consider like some Braille part of it in the future?
I think that would be great. Great idea. If anybody, yeah, Eugene.
Has the Pope seen your preliminary?
No. Mm-mm. No, this has all been through the Vatican Publishing House. So, yes, eventually he will. Eventually, I would love to give it to him myself. It would be nice. But, yeah. Yes?
Are you working with all like found images, or are you working with any like commissioning art or photography for it, or will you? Maybe
Oh
do
yeah,
that if
I'm
you don't
open.
get
No,
copyright?
yeah, and some of the photographs are mine. Some of the photographs are from some of my friends. Some of the photographs are from some of my students. I just need to tell the story in the best way that I can, through images and through a written story. Yeah, Dave.
Some of your images are really, really detailed, and they look amazing at that size.
Uh-huh.
How do they look when you shrink it down to 4 by 3?
Oh, you can come up and see. They look beautiful. Yeah. Because there's only one image, they're, you know,
Have you had any trouble with some of them as you scaled them down? You're like, that's not going to work?
you know, you usually don't have that trouble. It's when you have to scale up that's the trouble. When you scale down, you just need to make sure that you have the best crop of the image. And that's always fun to figure out. Okay. Other questions? All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah.